find one at your local library, ask a friend, or come to Fishtrap and ask us if we can get you a copy, because we will. The Big Read is a part of the National Endowment for the Arts program, and it's managed by Arts Center, Arts Midwest. And what Fishtrap is providing is each week a different kind of event, something that will enrich your experience about learning about sailors, sailing, whaling, and American history in general. And today we're going to learn about sailor superstitions. Can't wait to hear about that. But first, I want to thank our community sponsors, Community Bank, Arts Center East, with the Oregon Arts Commission, and the Book Loft. And with today's presentation, we've partnered with the Columbia River Maritime Museum, and the Museum Educator there, Julia Triezenberg, is going to tell us a little bit about sailor superstitions. Yesterday, we learned how to make hardtack. Today, it's something else. So, Julia, hey, are there any ocean-going vessels out there in the river today?
Oh yeah, we probably have 7 or 8 bulk carriers from what I saw out there this morning. So there's a good amount.
And those sailors are sitting on, maybe they're tuning in too. So take it away. I can't wait to hear what you have.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, my name is Julia, and I work in the education department at the Columbia River Maritime Museum in Astoria. And today, we're going to be learning all about sailor superstitions. Now, the important thing to know about superstitions in the maritime world is that life at sea was really difficult, right? It could be very dangerous. And as you're reading In the Heart of the Sea, I'm sure you've noticed just how hard it could be. And so over time, these sailors have created different actions or rituals or beliefs, these things that we call superstitions, to help them feel safe while they're at sea. And so the first superstition that we're going to learn about on our list today is that bananas are bad luck on board a boat. You've probably heard this if you've ever been on a fishing boat, because this has originated with fishermen living in tropical areas where bananas grow, right? The story goes that a lot of times fishermen would be asked to move these bananas as they were heading from point A to point B. But the problem is if you've ever had a bunch of bananas on your counter, say at home, you know how quickly these bananas can turn brown. And so the fishermen had to move so fast to where they were going to make sure those bananas didn't go bad that they never actually had any time to fish, right? They didn't have time to do their jobs. And so as time went on, bananas became seen as this bad omen for fishermen. And to this day, if you bring a banana on board a fishing boat, you're probably going to get told to throw it overboard. So bananas are bad luck. Whistling is also considered forbidden on a lot of ships because it's seen as like a dare to the ocean. It's like you're egging the ocean on to whistle up a storm. Now, the thing with these superstitions is that there are exceptions to a lot of these rules. And so one of the exceptions to whistling is that on a lot of ships, the youngest person on board is allowed to whistle. And the other exception is that the cook is allowed to whistle, because if he's whistling, it means that his mouth isn't full of the crew's food, right? If he was eating the crew's breakfast while he was making it, he wouldn't be able to whistle. So he's the exception on that superstition there. And this photo in particular is really special to us at the Maritime Museum because it's a photo of the galley of the lightship Columbia, this floating lighthouse that guided ships to the mouth of the Columbia River. It's one of the largest artifacts in our collection. And you can see in the background of this photo here, they're having some Captain Crunch with their breakfast as well. Now, there are lucky and unlucky days to start a voyage for a lot of sailors. For example, Sunday is considered to be a lucky day to start your journey, but Thursday is unlucky. And that's because Thursday didn't used to be called Thursday. It was actually originally Thor's Day, right? This day that was kind of owned by the Norse god of storms, of thunder, of lightning. and of bad weather. And so no good sailor would want to start his journey on a day that belonged to the god of bad weather, right? They would pick a Sunday instead of a Thursday. It was too unlucky to start then. There are some forbidden words in the maritime community, things like goodbye or good luck. I tend to think of how the theater community also says break a leg instead of good luck, right? It's a little bit of a bad omen in that way. Other forbidden words would be any variation of the words drown, drowned, drowning. And then kind of interestingly, pig and rabbit are said to be forbidden words for a lot of people because they have some sort of bad juju. And these animals have a kind of devilish quality to them on board a ship, to the point where some sailors, particularly in the 17 and 1800s, would actually come up with nicknames for the pigs and rabbits that were on their ship, so that they didn't actually have to use those words at all, right? Because they were forbidden on board. Now, we talked about Thor, right? This Norse god who controls the storms, the weather, thunder, and lightning. And so in this case, we're going to be talking about Neptune, right? This figure in Roman mythology, the king of the oceans. Neptune has a list of all the ships that are at sea at any given point in time. And this list is called the Ledger of the Deep. Now, one of the reasons why it's considered unlucky to change your ship's name is because Neptune might think that you're trying to trick him by changing the Ledger of the Deep without his permission, and he'll punish you and your crew for doing this, right? So it's not technically impossible to change your ship's name, but you do have to go through a certain amount of steps and take the proper precautions so that it's not unlucky. And the first step in changing your ship's name is the purging ceremony, where you're basically getting rid of any aspect of the ship's old name that could be on board. And that could be the paint on your vessel's hull, that could be life rings with the name, or documents that have the ship's old name. You have to get rid of all of that and then basically go to Neptune, explaining what you've done and asking his blessing to change into the new name that you've chosen for your ship. And then, of course, every ceremony in the maritime world ends with a toast of champagne. So there's a lot of champagne involved here. After you've gone through the purging ceremony, next is the renaming ceremony, where you basically, once again, go to Neptune, explain why you want to change the name, offer up this new name for your vessel. And then one of the final steps is to actually smash one of your champagne bottles on the bow or on the front of your ship. And we always recommend that you have some sort of tarp or plastic bag to catch all of that glass there. So you've gone through the purging ceremony, you've gone through the renaming ceremony, you have Neptune's blessing, but the final step is actually to talk to the 4 wind gods, the gods of the north, south, east, and western winds. And you're once again confirming that you've had Neptune's blessing, and you also need theirs to change your ship's name. And only then is it considered a-okay to move forward in that process. So it's not completely unlucky or impossible to do it, but it's important to go through these 3 stages so that nothing bad happens to you or your crew on your newly named ship. Now, this next superstition is an expression that I heard a lot growing up on Lake Michigan, and it was a way for sailors to predict the kind of weather they might have during their voyages. So the expression goes, red sky at night, sailors delight, and red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. Now, this is going with the idea that a red sky is a sign of high air pressure, or what's called stable air, right? A red sky is a sign of good weather. Now, weather tends to travel from west to east, and the sun sets in the west and it rises in the east, okay? So say we're in England, where this expression originally came from, and we're looking towards the west where the sun is setting, and we notice that there's a beautiful red, rosy sky. What that tells us is that red sky, right, that sign of stable air, of good weather, is in the west. And as we're sleeping at night, it's going to move east towards us so that hopefully in the morning we'll wake up with that stable air and good weather all around us. But let's say another day we wake up and the sun is rising in the east and there's a beautiful red rosy sky. What that would tell us is that while we were sleeping, once again, that weather moved from west to east past us, so that when we wake up, we see that stable air and that good weather already past us in the east, which is to say that anything that comes after that is probably not as good as the weather that we saw before. Okay, so by looking at all these cues around you, you could try to kind of predict what that experience is going to be like from one day to the next. And that's why they would say red sky at night, sailor's delight, or red sky in the morning, sailors take warning, right? It's a sign of bad weather to come. Now, last but not least today, we have a good omen here. Seabirds, these birds that spend most of their time out in the open ocean, they get their food from the sea. They're considered talismans for a lot of sailors. They're protectors, and they're said to carry the souls of sailors who have died at sea to their final resting place. Now, the albatross is one of the largest seabirds in the world, and it's considered especially important in the maritime community because of this famous story from way back when by a man named Samuel Taylor Coleridge called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Now, in the story, the mariner and his crew are traveling along when an albatross comes onto their ship. And his crew sees this as a good omen, right? They love the albatross, they give it nicknames, they see this as a good sign for them. The mariner shoots the albatross, and spoilers, but it's a very old story, tragedy after tragedy after tragedy basically befalls this ship until the ancient mariner is the only one left. And he basically needs to go and spend the rest of his life telling the story of what happened after he hurt this innocent seabird, right? The seabird that is supposed to be such a talisman for all of these sailors in the maritime world. The really interesting and special thing about the albatross in particular is that you can find different species of albatross all around the world, but there are 3 different types of albatross that actually use Oregon waters as part of their migration. So remember, albatross are seabirds. They spend most of their time out in the open ocean, which means you wouldn't see an albatross on a lake or a river here. You really wouldn't see one on our beaches. But if you were out on a boat, way out in the water, you might actually see either the black-footed albatross, the Laysands albatross, or the short-tailed albatross somewhere off the coast of Oregon, which is really special. And with that, that is all for me today on our kind of greatest hits list of sailor superstitions. There are some that I didn't cover today, and then there are other explanations that maybe you've heard for these stories, which I would love to get your feedback and comments on as well. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. Once again, my name is Julia from the Columbia River Maritime Museum, and we will see you next week. With that, I will turn it back on over to Mike. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. That was fascinating. I learned some things. And all of you folks, whether you're watching this live or you're watching the recording, whether you're sitting in your school classroom, enjoying one of these videos over your lunch break, or sitting around the family table watching it as well, we're glad you came along and hope you got something out of it. You can always go back. We'll have recordings of all of these programs at fishtrap.org. And you can share them with friends. And then next week, Julia will be back with us again on Wednesday and Thursday, where we'll learn about whaling in Oregon and the golden age of whaling. So until then, thanks, everybody. Have a great day and enjoy the big read.